Hello, everybody. Get this set up here. I see that I have audio, so that's something. Won't run into that same issue today. So I wanted to. Is that focusing all right? It's probably catching the lip of my hat. Anyway, I wanted to bring up a kind of a topic that some of you watching this might have seen me roll through with a few people on Twitter the other day. Actually, yesterday morning and the night before. And I thought I'd go through it now because it's a lot easier to talk it through than it is to try and blast it out on Twitter. Twitter really needs to start up the whole threading thing for replies, because having to type the whole 1x, 1 out of x at the end of a tweet to try and indicate, like, oh, there's another one coming, I haven't finished my thought yet. Getting a little old, but moving in the right direction. I like being able to post a thread. But anyway, because we all know I'm long-winded, and I'm proving it now. So this was basically what kind of this, not necessarily this particular article, but the story to go along with it, or the events that I guess inspired it. Austrian far-right extremist denied U.S. travel permit after Christchurch link. Austrian Identitarian leader Martin Sellner has been denied entry into the U.S. It comes after he was linked to the Christchurch terror attack. Okay. Let's see how he was linked, and we'll work from there. Australian Identitarian movement leader Martin Sellner said on Thursday that his U.S. travel permit had been cancelled by authorities. Sellner is currently under investigation, and his home was raided this week for suspected ties to the suspected gunman of the New Zealand attack. Authorities discovered that the accused Christchurch gunman sent a €1,500 $1,700 donation to Sellner last year. Banned UK entry. As far as I can tell, right, this is the reason. The Austrian authorities have raided his home. To my knowledge, not arrested, not being detained for it. So, banned UK entry. Austrians do not require a visa to travel to the US as part of a visa waiver program with EU countries, but they must go through the electronic system for travel authorization, ESTA, to be granted entry. In a statement on social media, Sellner noted that US authorities had never denied him entry over his political activism. He said the move was interfering with his personal life, and I believe that would refer to Brittany Pettibone, who I think is his fiance. I could be mistaken. There it is. Yeah, sorry. Two moments later. In a statement on social media, Sellner noted that his U.S. authorities... we'd actually planned to get married in the U.S. this summer, and I've always been able to get in to the United States without problems, Sellner said on his YouTube channel. But last year, Sellner and his American fiance, there we go. Brittany, it does bother me when they don't use the accent aigu with fiance. But either way, not the point here. Were denied entry into the UK, with officials saying their presence in the country was not conducive to the public good. Let's not go with what the UK deems as being conducive to the public good, shall we? The U.S. Embassy in Vienna did not comment on the case, and the Department for Homeland Security also did not respond. It remains unclear if Sellner would be eligible to travel It remains unclear if Sellner would be eligible to travel to the U.S. with a separate visa. The Identitarians are a pan-European movement that began in France in 2003. Since then, the Austrian branch has become the bloc's most visible. They advocate for a homogenous white. I don't necessarily believe that's incorrect. I think that might be roughly. See, I don't think when I see this is the thing. I see a lot of people being concerned about the the Islamization of countries, and these are the Great Replacement, and that is like white people becoming minorities. So there's, I suppose, there's the concern there. But even then, I haven't... Now, it could be out there. But I haven't seen... We need to remove all minorities from the countries. because there seems to be a distinct concern for European culture. I've read through some of the stuff on the albeit translated through Google Translate, identitarian organizations, for especially for Austria, their content, and it's a lot of focus on culture, and that's why I think you see a lot of references to, like, when they're quoting it, it's a whole lot of Islamic. They worry about Islamization, which of course is a matter of people, holding a specific set of ideas, and shared values that are in accordance with Islamic values. But in any event, and spread the Great Replacement conspiracy theory based on inflated statistics and unsubstantiated demographic projections, but they insist their tactics are not racist. There's a lot of people on both sides of this whole bit. The white folks going, well, we're going to become a minority in our own countries. And then people of color like, yeah, you're going to become a minority in your own country. I'm like, okay, I could bring up the whole, the terroristic Canadian Tire, parts 1 and 2 that Short Fat Otaku covered. But this guy is legitimately, he's identifies as a brown man, and he is legitimately looking forward to making white people a minority in Canada, because he understands what happens to white people in some countries when they become a minority. He specifically references South Africa, and if you're not familiar with the South African situation, look up "Kill the Boer," BOER. Bit of a rallying song for one of the major South African parties right now. But in any event, there have been a slew of murders with murders, rape, and torture of white farmers in South Africa. And this fella actually is in my province in Canada, has advocated for that to be happening here. It's like, okay, so there are these people. It's like they're a minority, but they definitely exist. So is it a conspiracy to say that there are people who are looking to make white people a minority so that they can then impose their will upon white people in Western countries? It's not a lie to say that, right? The viability of it, like how likely is that to occur? I wouldn't say very likely. It takes a massive overhaul of Canadian, legal structures to do that. Still possible. Canada already feels that it's appropriate to infringe upon an individual's right if that's, what the society demands. So, anyway, we'll leave that there. But it's extremely unlikely to ever happen, as far as the whole become a minority and then be just murdered out of your homes. But to become a minority, well, the projections show that for the first couple of generations, first generation immigrants have a higher birth rate than a standing population, the incumbent population, if you will. Happens in most countries. I think if I had to hazard a guess at it, I would say it's that people who emigrate from a country are leaving to go somewhere where they feel they'll be more prosperous, and people who don't have prosperity and suddenly come into it live life to excess to someone, or at least to more excess than they would have otherwise. And if there's a whole bunch of food around and you have more resources now, well, it might have been the case that if you come from a really poorly off country, you have more kids so that more of them will survive to adulthood. That was the case for, when Canada was just a developing nation. It's like medical care wasn't good, public works weren't that great, kids died during childbirth, huge infant mortality rates. It's like, okay, how do you compensate for that? You have a lot of kids. And so your parents had a lot of kids, and their parents had a lot of kids, and their parents had a lot of kids. But if you don't change the whole having a lot of kids thing, and then the mortality rate drops, then you have a whole bunch of kids making it through to adulthood. But that's just that. It only makes sense if you have the ability to do so, and you're already in a pattern of families, like large families, that you would keep that going. But anyway, we're off on quite the tangent here. Austria's conservative Chancellor Sebastian Kurz told reporters on Wednesday that his government planned to act against extremism, quote, whether it's radical Islamism or far-right fanatics. I'm fairly certain that Islamism in most of its beliefs is quite far-right, quite authoritarian right, but it's odd to see those two split. I understand what they mean when they do this, when they say that, but it's odd because far-right extremism fits the bill for both. Furthermore, we will examine whether the Identitarians can be dissolved, Kurtz said. State prosecutors told DW, this is the article, or the outlet we're using here, they would not comment on Sellner as he was the subject of an ongoing investigation related to his links with the Christchurch shooting suspect. Now, of course, they haven't commented on much regarding Sellner. The statement appears to be based on the donation to Sellner, and of course, thought I saw that photo. I was going to bring up this one here. Austrian far-right leader denies link to Christchurch shooter. The alleged shooter in Christchurch donated money to the far-right Identitarian movement in early 2018. The movement, so I'll see movement repeated messages in the killer's so-called manifesto. Probably more him repeating them, but different. Here's a 980 link. There's this video again. An Austrian far-right political group denied links to the alleged Christchurch terrorist after it emerged that he donated money to the group. The 28-year-old Australian man, Austrian and Australian, this is going to get terrible, shot dead 50 people in 2 mosques in New Zealand earlier this month, donated €1,500, $1,700 to Austria's Identitarian movement in early 2018. Austrian prosecutors said the donation is now the subject of a terrorism investigation. Police raided the home of group leader Martin Sellner on Monday as part of an investigation into Sellner's possible, quote, establishment of or membership in a terrorist organization, prosecutors said. The Austrian Interior Ministry told DW it could not comment on the ongoing investigation. In an online video, Sellner, get a copy, editor. You're a major publication. You can do better than this. Denied links to the alleged shooter, but reiterated his racist message. Quote, I have nothing to do with this terrorist attack. I will pass on the sum to a charitable organization, Sellner said. He then vowed to continue fighting against, quote, great replacement, the belief that non-European and Muslim migrants will become the majority in the European population. The alleged shooter's so-called manifesto was also titled The Great Replacement. Okay. Sellner said he did not know the terrorist suspect and his only contact was a standard thank you email following his donation, which is commonplace for most organizations accepting donations. The alleged shooter visited Austria as part of his travels before the attack. Authorities said the donation value was significant compared to standard donations to the group. Should also be noted that this particular man, obviously not well, had come into a significant amount of money. There we go. I've heard that it was to do with cryptocurrency, possibly Bitcoin, but essentially the guy had money. He picked a particular NGO and donated to it because he could afford to do so. I'm sure that when celebrities donate, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to donation or to charities, that's not the norm. It's probably larger than the average donation. But they go, well, the people have money and they want to support that group. Yes, a very, very bad man donated money to a group. The group had prior to been cleared of being a criminal. It was accused of being a criminal organization by Austrian officials. They investigated the group, and the group was cleared on those charges. So it wasn't a criminal organization, which means that a private citizen used their private property to donate to an NGO that was perfectly legal at the time. Now, the Austrian government is looking to try, this fellow here, Sebastian Kurz, is looking to try and disband, I think it's Generation Identity? Or Generation Identitarians? Anyway, the Austrian Identitarian movement. And I find that odd, at least given that no criminal wrongdoing has been demonstrated so far. Because if they're not committing fraud, so they're not breaching the bounds of how they're registered as an NGO. If they're not breaching that sort of registration with their own government and they're not committing criminal acts, they're just a public advocacy group for something the government happens to not agree with. And I don't think that... Get out of there, Bill. I love this cat to death, but jeez. I don't think that's something the government really needs to get involved with trying to shut down. I think that the government's well within its rights to take a look at them, investigate to see if there is any wrongdoing. But if there's no criminal wrongdoing, if you're gonna go free speech, okay, they're allowed to speak. We're allowed to hear them. We're allowed to criticize them. Fair play. In any event, Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz tweeted, "Any connection between the Christchurch attacker and members of the Identitarians in Austria needs to be comprehensively and ruthlessly investigated." Okay, yeah. If any major connections that he has, look them up, track them down, see if there's any kind of causal factor there. If somebody from members of the Identitarians, I think it's like GI. I don't know what it said. Like it's Generation Identity, but I'm not sure. Actually, you know what? Screw that. I will actually Identitarians. Chartered by GI. Generation Identity. Yeah, that's it. So, it is important that the independent justice system can use all necessary means and resources. Sorry, cat. He chews on the wires, so I gotta try and keep him away from all that. It is important that the independent justice system can use all necessary means and resources to conduct its investigation together with the security services and expose these networks. There needs to be total clarity about all extremist activities. Agreed. You can investigate all you like, you can bring all of it into the light and say, this is what this group believes, this is what this group's been doing. But if they're not breaking the law, and they're just speaking, I can't get behind actively working to stop them. Fear of an Islamic country. The Identitarians are a pan-European movement that began in France in 2003. Yep, covered that. Yep, most visible. This is almost word for word repeating the earlier articles. They insist their tactics are not racist, but their concerns echo other far-right protest movements, including Germany's Pegida, P-E-G-I-D-A. They advocate for a homogenous brackets white Europe. I don't know why that has to keep getting put in brackets, but they keep having to put this in brackets. So I think this is them saying, this is what we believe they're saying, as opposed to this is what we can demonstrate that they're saying. Believe the continent is being turned into an Islamic land and spread the, quote, Great Replacement conspiracy theory based on inflated statistics. Yeah, so we've heard that one already. So currently only 4% of the European Union's population is made up of non-EU nationals. How dangerous are Austria's... So, I don't know how they would define nationals. So like if you emigrate from a country, immigrate into another country, and then gain citizenship there, do you become a national of that country? Let's find out. National. Could probably use the word definition after that to help me out. So, a citizen of a particular country typically entitled to hold that country's passport. Yeah. So, if you leave your home country and move to the EU and gain EU citizenship, you could be described as an EU national because you're now a citizen of an EU nation. I don't know if that's how they're using that. I'll be entirely fair. I do not know if that's how they're using this. But that would technically be accurate. That'd be technically accurate, the best kind of accurate. So, like, we can keep kind of following down this. More Generation Identity. Yeah, the Defend Europe mission. Identitarian movement. Sellner in the back there. Yep. So here's my issue. This was the article that was shared to me as a definitive statement of, well, he's violent. They want to physically harm people, and that's a reason why you can't let them in the country. Okay, if they've been, violent, and even then, certain forms of violence are acceptable, because to defend oneself can be a violent act. When Germany invaded France in World War, the start of World War II, the French fought back. It was a violent conflict, but it wasn't unjustified, or couldn't be understood. So, but anyway, this was positioned to me as a whole. They're being violent. We cannot let them in. He has a violent past. Like, okay. My thought here, though, is that much like how with the Tommy Robinson Facebook takedown, where people said, well, months ago he posted all of these terrible things saying behead the followers of Islam and all the rest of this. It's like, well, this guy's had a spotlight on him for a couple of years now. It seems as though that's not something that, like, the British Crown would have missed for a matter of months and months. So I'm disinclined to believe it. But I think a similar situation applies here. In Germany and in Europe as a whole, particularly Germany and Austria, they have a pretty justifiably so. They are still pretty puckered about any kind of right-wing movement. Can you blame them? So for a group like Generation Identity, if they were being criminally violent, I have a feeling that we'd be hearing all about arrest records. These would not be, the photos we'd be seeing would not be these, demonstration or it wouldn't be these kinds of shots. It wouldn't be this sort of a picture, right? We'd be dealing with mug shots, okay, stand and face, okay, turn. We'd be dealing with mug shots as opposed to the very, and credit to the BBC on this one, humanizing photos, obviously not a good look. Not a good look. Tiki Torch is ruined for everyone. But this isn't an unflattering photo, right? It's just standard close-up headshot. This here, right? Not an unflattering photo, just him chatting to a couple people, smiling, people having a grand old time, right? There's really the image that they use of him, the visual image, aside from this one photo, right? Very normal. So credit to the BBC. I'm sure they could have found far more incriminating representations of him. But I feel like this is one of those things that would have been used had it existed. But anyway, this all comes back around to he's violent. And somebody had mentioned, well, they were going to sink the migrant ships coming across the Mediterranean from Africa. And I was like, okay, that definitely sounds terrible. I actually saw a video the other day of Russian and U.S. military ships engaging Somali pirates. We're talking blowing boats out of the water. I'm like, okay, that's some violent imagery. I could imagine how this would terrify people. How are they sinking them? Are the people still aboard when they sink them? And the presumption, or at least the insinuation, was, of course, that they would have been on board when sunk. And so I think it's important to point out here that even the Southern Poverty Law Center, okay, the oft-debunked and being entirely fair, extremely biased SPLC, had this to say about the whole incident with the Defend Europe missions. So, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, like Doctors Without Borders, search the international waters between Libya and Italy for immigrants in distress. And in this case, they use immigrants, technically true. These people are trying to unlawfully enter the northern Mediterranean countries. They have saved thousands, yet drawn the anger of groups like Generation Identity, which accuses the NGOs of being in league with human traffickers and of fueling a, quote, invasion of Europe by non-whites and Muslims. That's because the NGOs transport Africans to European ports where they enter the European refugee and immigration system rather than transporting them back to Africa. The European Union border agency Frontex ruled last year that Libya, a war-torn country ruled by rival militias, is too dangerous a place to return immigrants rescued at sea. So they understand from this ruling that if they float themselves out on boats, right, that when they're picked up, they can't be returned back to the country from which they came. For 3 hours, the Generation Identity members and Southern, Lauren Southern pictured here, bobbed in the shadows. When the Doctors Without Borders ship disembarked, they positioned their raft directly in its path, live streaming their actions on Periscope. Southern lit a rescue flare while the GI members unfurled a banner that said, "No way for human trafficking." "If the politicians won't stop the boats, we'll stop the boats," Southern declared. They didn't stop the boat for long. In short order, they were taken into custody by Italian Coast Guard officers, and the Doctors Without Borders ship was on its way. Later that night, Southern appeared in a second Periscope livestream with Martin Sellner, the then 28-year-old leader of Generation Identity's Austrian branch. I keep wanting to say Australian. That is really, really annoying. Sellner hinted in the livestream that the Generation Identity's short-lived, quote, blockade of the NGO ship was just the beginning of a new mission to, quote, track down and stop I don't know what the injection would be there, dirty work of these human trafficking ships. The following week, Generation Identity launched a fundraising campaign online for, quote, Defend Europe, a mission to gather a crew, equip a boat, and set sails on the Mediterranean to chase down the trafficking ships. Every week, every day, every hour, ships packed with illegal immigrants are flooding into European waters. An invasion is taking place, the Defend Europe statement declared. This massive immigration is changing the face of our continent. We are losing our safety and our way of life, and there is a danger we Europeans will become a minority in our own European homelands. Our future is under attack. Now, if you've been to France or you've been to Italy recently, you're going to notice a slight change over what you might have seen in years past. Now, I traveled to France back in 2007, and I do recall being there, got to see the Eiffel Tower, got to go through, a lot of different places. We were on a Vimy Ridge tour back in the day. And it was the 90th rededication ceremony that we were at, and made our way through a lot of the historical sites in France. And there's something you notice. There were a couple of soldiers here and there, some of them around the Eiffel Tower. As you kind of got away from there, less and less so, up onto the hills in Montmartre and the rest of it, not as present. But you absolutely noticed there were a couple around. Now, to be fair, this is 6 years down the road from 9/11. The war on terror is still, it's at its height, if anything. Understandable. Nowadays, if you go and visit, you will see soldiers most places you go in major cities. More so now that French head of state, Emmanuel Macron, has brought in the French military to address the LFS protests. But there's that. Many people who have been visiting Rome and major attractions in Italy over the last few years have also noticed an uptick in soldiers on the streets. It's not as though there's a whole lot of just regular civil unrest going on, but there have been a significant number of extremist attacks in Europe. Is it unreasonable to say that there has been a correlation in the rise of violent attacks of a particular motivating nature, along with the influx of migrants from the South Mediterranean countries? There was the bus burned not too long ago with a whole bunch of school children that were on it who thankfully managed to escape, by a man claiming revenge for all of the child migrants who died trying to cross the Mediterranean. To say that they are losing their safety and way of life, well, I would be very surprised if I went to Toronto or Ottawa, I would see armed and uniformed soldiers just patrolling the streets. And I'm not saying it's like a Nazi occupation, like there's just soldiers everywhere. But it would definitely be something very out of place here in Canada. I wouldn't expect to go to Toronto or Montreal or Ottawa or Vancouver or any major Canadian city and just see the military as commonplace. I'd expect to see that in military towns, major Air Force bases in Ontario. There's a full-on, Army base and artillery range out in New Brunswick. These are like the surrounding towns, and that there I would expect to see people in uniforms everywhere. Not armed, but like seeing the uniforms around would be more commonplace. But to see them armed and on patrol around the country would be, to me, a very major change in my way of life. It wouldn't sit well with me going on day to day. And fortunately, I don't live in a city where... It's not a city that would be a target for any kind of extremist action. It's a pretty small town, by most standards. So it doesn't really concern me as much with the whole, vehicle rammings, people using vehicles as weapons and knife attacks and shootings and all the rest of it. So for me to see that would be quite jarring. But I can imagine being in places like Quebec City after the mosque shootings. And when being in Ottawa after the Michael Zehaf-Bibeau shooting occurred a couple of years ago on Parliament Hill. Like, that would rattle me. That would really shake me. And I would definitely feel as though my safety was being eroded by those sorts of actions. Now, the stuff about the invasion and the rest of it, that's, I would say, unnecessary rhetoric. But if we keep scrolling down, Sellner, who speaks fluent English, became the primary spokesperson. There was a statement. Here it was. Sellner, who speaks fluent English, became the primary spokesperson for Defend Europe. In media interviews and fundraising videos, he pledged that Defend Europe would patrol the central Mediterranean for immigrants to pick up and hand over to the Libyan Coast Guard. Once the boats were empty, he said, Defend Europe would sink them. Okay, so you have one side of things, which is taking immigrants to ports to put them into the migrant and the refugee system, and you have one group that is taking them to the Italian Coast Guard, presumably to have the Coast Guard say, no, you can't come in, we're going to move you to a different country, and you can go through a different process somewhere else. One group wants to turn them over to one government authority. The other group wants to take them and bring them to a different government authority. Now, difference being, the migrants probably don't want to go to the Coast Guard. They would much rather go to to the ports and be brought in that way. Through like the migration ones and the refugee centers. That's where they'd probably rather be. But it's kind of a beggars can't be choosers situation, if you think about it. You are relying on the good graces of somebody else to come get you from the Mediterranean and bring you into their country. It's like, okay, you don't have a right to be there, but you're going to show up anyway. Okay. One group's not taking you exactly where you want to go, but they are turning you over to the authorities. Okay. And that same group is going to make sure that the boat you used to come across on isn't just towed back by another boat to be used again to bring more people across, because they oppose this sort of migration. with that alone, with the act of taking people who are attempting to gain unlawful entry into a country and delivering them to a relevant government authority, in this case the Coast Guard, and then working to deny the material required to bring more people into the country unlawfully, I don't see anything fundamentally wrong with that. Okay? If they're sinking these boats with people on them, if they are torturing or somehow mistreating these people in a criminal way, I don't think that's acceptable. But to take people who are floating out in the middle of the ocean, trying to get into your country, and deliver them to your Coast Guard, who in theory would guard your coast against people entering the country, I don't see a problem with that. I understand when people hear, well, he was on a mission to sink these migrant ships. Like, people are probably envisaging him, like, captaining at the helm of a submarine that's just come up and just, like, firing a bow gun off at it. Like, I can definitely see that like, old school World War II German propaganda poster where, you know, you've got, like, the families all aboard the ocean liner, and, like, up comes this German sub, and, like, the, you know, angry, square-jawed, you know, like, you know, Nazis there with getting the bow gun ready, or the fire of the torpedoes and all that shit. I see how easy that is to draw that particular image. But that's not quite accurate. But this all comes back around to... This all comes back around to this. Nope. One more. This. I spoke with a couple of people who, based on Sellner's statements and the messages that his group promotes, that just on that, these things that have not been deemed illegal and which would not be considered unlawful in the United States where he was looking to travel, he shouldn't be allowed in the country. And these are people who claim that they champion free speech, they champion the First Amendment, but only insofar as it applies to citizens of the United States. And this is what irks me, is that, to me, that's not a principled position. You are not taking that stance in regards to the First Amendment based on the spirit of the First Amendment. There's the heart of the law and the wording of the law. The wording of the law says this, but what's the meaning of it? What's the heart of it? And if you get down, to the heart of the matter on that, what is the real meaning? And when it comes to freedom of speech, and perhaps this is just me as an outsider, I'm Canadian, of course, looking at America in a very different lens than Americans would look at their own country. I view certain things as being inextricably linked with being American, right? Not being a white American, not being a black American, not being any sort of like subsection, just with being American. When someone says, it's as American as apple pie and baseball. Okay? So, when people think, okay, what do you think when you think of America? What would you say that if you took it out of the country, right, would be un-American, right? If you were to say, well, no, this, you can't have this, or this is a thing. No, we remove that from culture. Which elements of the American experience, if you will, if removed, would constitute a fundamental compromise of Americanism. America. I think about it and I go, okay, well, what's the American dream? Great place to start. To start from nothing, to, by your own efforts, by the sweat of your own brow and your own competence, to build something that, is lasting, supports you and your family and allows you to live a more prosperous life than what you started with. American dream. Make something of nothing. Become the most successful person in the country. All from the humblest of beginnings. Okay, that's definitely one. Two, the importance placed on an individual to determine for themselves what they're going to do, how they're going to think, and what they're going to say. An integral component of the American existence would be that essence of liberty, of freedom, this concept of freedom. I may disagree with what you've said, but I defend to the death your right to say it. That to me is something that I admire the United States for. Because in Canada, we don't have the same concrete protections for our own free expression. Actually, really not even, it's getting worse. Ours don't come close. No other country I'm aware of comes close. It's like, oh, but hate speech. It's like, okay, yes, people can say things that will hurt your feelings, that you find to be hateful. They have an opinion that you find to be repugnant. Hell, that I find to be repugnant, but it's their opinion. Are they taking action on it to directly harm other people? And I don't mean emotional harm. I don't mean they hurt your feelings. I mean, did somebody get up out of bed one day, set up their camera, get their mic all going, click on their stream and go, I don't like these people, and I think these people are this, and I think those people are this. Did they do that? Okay. Did that hurt your feelings? Yeah. Okay. Did you have to watch them? No. Did the government promote them and make you watch them? No. Okay. So you got two options. One, you can disagree with that person publicly and enact your freedom of speech. Say, look, I don't agree with you. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 why I don't agree with you, why I think you're full of shit. Be on your way. On the other side, you can just go block them. You can just remove them from your life. Digitally hit that little delete button and never going to hear from them again. And those are your options. They don't seem so bad to me. I've blocked people. I've muted others. Like, you know what? Like, I don't think you're engaging in good faith. I think you're a little bit off the fucking, you're a little out there. I don't think I'm going to change your mind, and I don't think there are enough people that are going to see this discussion between you and I to affect their minds. So I'm going to leave you be, work on bigger fish to fry. But I also don't want my notifications blowing up from you, so hashtag don't at me. I'm just going to mute you. And then there are people who I happen to know are looking to... you know who you are. People who are looking to undermine everything I do or say or any online presence that I have. And I shouldn't say people. I know there's at least one person. And that person can kindly go take all of that shit, ball it up, and shove it up their ass. But when I see somebody who is like that, who is just maliciously coming after me, they don't want to engage in discussion, they don't want to have any sort of they don't want to explain their position, they just want to shut me up, I go, block, done. I will prohibit you from seeing what I'm doing. You'll have to go create another, it'll be like the 23rd alt account now. and I'll see you, and you'll have all the same, follows and followers again, and posting the same messages and the same, Okay, yeah, I'll just block you again. I'll move on to the next one. I'll take down the note of the name, archive your followers and following, throw it into that spreadsheet I got going, and hey, off we go. That's how you handle it. If you don't like it, tough shit. Harden up. But in any event, I saw people who were of course disagreeing with the freedom of speech as the Supreme Court of the United States has defended it. Disagreeing that agreeing with the proposition that you can simultaneously not support the First Amendment as it's been defined as a universal principle for all men who are in theory created equal and who have certain inalienable rights. And they agree that you can set aside that founding principle of the United States and yet still be a true American patriot. And I find that to ring false. I'm not an American. And so, of course, I am coming at this from an outsider's perspective on America. But I think that if you asked the average person in the U.S. or around the world, do you think that the United States would still be what is truly America without the right to free speech? I think if you ask people that, they'd say no. In fact, I don't figure this has probably got a whole bunch of replies or votes yet, but I will find this because I did create a poll on this one. Just a little stick the toe in the water, get a feel for what the temperature's like. But Christ Almighty, I've gone through and retweeted and tweeted a bunch of shit in the last while. Actually, you know what? I believe I did share this tweet to somebody. Haha. Yeah, currently only 8 votes. On the topics of patriotism, human rights, and freedom of speech. Can you be a patriotic American and support fundamental human rights, yet not stand by the First Amendment as it has been defined and defended by SCOTUS? Example, SCOTUS has ruled that hate speech is free speech. 12% unsure, 75% no, 13% yes, a whopping 8 votes. I think that there is a particular side of that argument that I forget which. I don't know if it was Bill Burr, but they're the door slammers. They get in, they slam the door behind them, and go, okay, nobody else gets in it. Like, we made it, we're good, nobody else. And like the U.S. seems to have been built on this mentality. People immigrate to the States, right? They get there, they get themselves established, they build their families, they build their businesses, and they go, okay, no, close the door behind me. Nobody else gets this, right? I like what I've built. It's all awesome. Shut it down. And I think that's what's happening with this sort of, well, I've got my free speech, so it's guaranteed to me. Screw you, you're on your own. It's like, it's a hell of a lot easier to support somebody's right to speak their mind than it is to advocate them entering the nation behind you. It is something I think you cannot remove from America and still have it really be America. And so to all the people who would say, well, I don't think that Martin Sellner should be allowed in the country because I don't agree with what he says and with what his NGO has said, or the NGO for which he's a founder or one of the leaders. Get out of there, Bill. You know what? Here, come here. Do you want cuddles or not, cat? Not now. Bill? Well, come here. Okay. All right. Up you come. Up you come. Say hi to Bill, everybody. We're going to take a little cat break. Because this is my buddy, and he's a very good cat. And when I get talking about stuff like this, I find myself I get quite worked up. And there's nothing better for me after, come home from night at work, vent to all of you guys about, whatever's been stuck in my craw, and then just bop the little bill around. So, if you guys have a perspective on the nature of the relationship between what it is to be American and what it is to be America and the First Amendment and valuing everyone's right to free expression, to freedom of speech, or the barring of Martin Sellner from the U.S., or really anything else we've touched on in this stream, please, by all means, my comment section will be open. You could also use Dissenter to dissent this video. If you do, I can't promise I'll check it by reflex, but I don't mind you guys posting a link to it, to the Dissenter page in your comments. Oh, hey, Hypno. Billy, Hypnagogic Monk says hello. I can pull him over here and show you guys close up if I can get that. But Billy will probably piece the second I try and grab the camera. It's okay, Bill. Do people want to see ya? Hey? Oh. Do people want to see the Bill? I gotta try and do this. Ah! There you go, Bill. You're fine. But if you got any comments you want to leave, or now that I can see you there in the chat, by all means, let me know, and I'll do my best to respond to them in the comments. I don't not like I get a whole bunch of them, so I got the time. And who knows? You might. Ooh, Bill. Okay, down you go. Something set Bill off there. Let's get this all fixed. Oh. There we go. Hey, no. If you got something to say, you agree with me, you disagree with me, you think I'm totally full of shit, you think I don't know, I'm a Canadian, therefore can't know what it's like down there in America, let me know. Comment section right down below. And I suppose that I think I've said everything I wanted to say about this. Free speech is inextricably linked to what it means to be American. To claim that you support free speech, but what are you doing, Bill? Do you want this? Yeah, he wants the sleeping bag. It's got strings on it. Whoa. 1. Free speech is inextricably linked with the concept of being American. 2. To not believe in the principle of free speech and to just kind of pull it as, well, it's citizens only and everybody else can fuck off and they don't get it. Or you don't believe that it speaks into everyone. I think you're self-interested, and I think you lack a certain degree of a certain principled nature that I think is important in people. Not that you're entirely unprincipled. I think you just lack a fundamental principle when it comes to your concept of an unalienable human right. And 3, I think that as of right now, working on innocent until proven guilty and actually examining the contextual reports of what's gone on with Sellner's groups, he does admit actually to being a member of neo-Nazi groups when he was younger. Not that he was violently involved with them, and he didn't consider himself a racist, but has stated that there weren't other groups that were what he would have deemed patriotic and right-leaning at the time. And it can be very hard to find right-leaning groups in Germany and Austria because, well, everyone's a little gun-shy. To forgive the bad use of terms. You know, once bitten, twice shy. Does it excuse hanging around with a bunch of neo-Nazis, not just trying to create your own movement? Not really, no. But people do a lot of dumb shit when they're younger. I know there are a lot of activists who, when I know people who I have interacted with on cat hair, on favorable terms, who in their younger days went out and violently attacked neo-Nazis and people on the far right. And they've come around and gone, yeah, you know what? Like, beating people's heads in doesn't solve anything. Makes you feel better for a while, gives you that, you know, that visceral adrenaline rush, but doesn't get you anywhere. They wind up hating you more. You know, if you take these people and you ban them and you drive them underground and you know, misrepresent them and all the rest of this crap, well, what happens? So they resent you. They go, yeah, there is this conspiracy against us, and it's like, great. You've given them the win. You know, you've validated their belief that you're trying to push them out. You're trying to silence them, trying to get rid of them. You know, when you have a group like this who goes, well, they're trying to replace us, and they're trying to get rid of us, they're trying to eliminate us from our own countries. And then a government official goes, yeah, we're looking for a way to disband this group. It's like, playing into our hand a little. But anyway, free speech inextricably linked to believe in free speech. I believe you have to believe in the principle behind it, not just that it applies to Americans. 3, I think that a lot of the Sellner stuff's been overblown. 4, I think that it's important for us to not just stick to one side of the reporting on this. Because if you know me, as far as Canadians go, I lean to the right. On my political compass test, I'm like a shaving's bit over to the right from center. Right? That's enough to get me branded as a right-winger on Twitter. But there's plenty of left-leaning policies I hold as well. I'm not a huge fan of the Globe and Mail. I'm not a huge fan of the Toronto Star. I'm definitely not a fan of the Southern Poverty Law Centre. I know that the BBC has been horribly dishonest and that they have their own agenda to push. DW in this has actually been pretty solid, to be quite honest. They've repeated themselves, but sometimes when there's only so much news, you're going to have a lot of overlap. I am willing to bring up and use and cite and read from the SPLC. And I do read from the Star, and I do read from the Globe and Mail, and I will read from the BBC, because I would like to see what both sides are saying about one particular issue. Because there's it's a very important skill when it comes to reading media, and that is being able to look at an article, identify emotionally manipulative language, right, and remove it from the article. Get down to what were the events that took place, right? I'll bring up an example. So, Jody Wilson-Raybould. There goes Bill. If you look up a story, you could probably have the same story in... We have the National Post. I'll bring up the Globe and Mail. Okay. Globe and Mail. I don't want to subscribe one. Yoink. Oh, this isn't going to format right, guys. My apologies. All right. So let's go to Canadian news. News. Oh, there it is. News. National. Okay. If you look at the two, there we go, stop. Let's see. Trump administration's pressure on Cuba could hit Canadian companies and business leaders. Warren. And as far as, yeah, let's hold on to this. I want politics. Because this will always bring out people's biases. And Trudeau. Politics. Publish expense reports. Liberals debate expelling Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jane Philpott from caucus. Russia abusing rights of Ukrainian voters. Charges head of election monitoring mission. Federal parties urged to bolster privacy protections beyond what the law requires. And let's find one. The story so far. You know what? That'll be a good one. This has been the story in Canada for the last little while. So you'll see a lot of stuff. Well, Trudeau rejected Jody Wilson-Raybould's conservative pick. So it's, oh, well, Trudeau hates those nasty conservatives. Wilson-Raybould says she'll provide more evidence, including texts and emails, and SNC-Lavalin. Okay. Here we go. Christy Blatchford, very, very prominent Post contributor. Liberal sheep may be ready to move on from LavScam, but I'm not. Okay. Are you getting the vibe here? Anti-Canadian Liberal Party. And don't let the name fool you. They're a progressive party, not a liberal party. Oh, you bastards. Well, you're not getting my fucking money. Per week for the first 24 weeks. No, thank you. Now it's about, oh, well, the Liberals are going to get rid of them. Usually you can find like the same story on both sides. But you will see, you'll see Canada, politics. Let's pull this up. Oh, yeah, I just tried to do this one. How about this one? Oh, no, it's locked. I guess that's what I'm seeing with the... All right. So... Voters, this is the party's decision to send a large volume of text messages on the weekend to voters in 4 provinces by the federal carbon tax. Backers with parties target messages. Hopeful separate interview. Requirements of privacy policy in place. Running parties with the new law requires things about how they could go further than one of use privacy standards. Email addresses be sent to companies and social media platforms for data analysts. Only required. There's nothing they cannot do under their privacy policies, Mr. Perot said. You know what? I'll give credit to this one. This was just a factual reporting. I hate having to say it. You're gonna have to take my word for it on this one. I guess the Star would be a really easy one just to bring stuff up. But if you're gonna see sensationalism, right? This will be one. I bet you this will have a lot of slam Trudeau if you can. Grassy Narrows put its promised funding for a mercury poisoning treatment center into a trust. Grassy Narrows, a video surfaced the Prime Minister telling processor Lana Goldberg, "Thank you very much for your donation," in response to her interruption of a high-end Liberal Party fundraiser Wednesday. Suffering from mercury poisoning in its local water supply for decades after an upstream pulp and paper mill dumped thousands of pounds of effluent into the English Wabagoon river system through the 60s and early 70s. Opposition members blasted Trudeau's comments as being flippant and smug, saying it contradicted the Liberal government's carefully crafted... Can you read it? Okay? Opposition members of Parliament criticized Trudeau's statements as being... And you can put in quotes like flippant and smug. Right? Saying that it contradicted the Liberal government's carefully crafted brand. And... So Trudeau was speaking at a so-called Laurier Club event, which are Liberal Party fundraisers attended solely by major donors who give $1,500 or more. Was it really necessary? Maybe. It's technically a fact. Okay, so the event will be refunded, he added. They wanted to express their concerns about an issue that I do take seriously, and I apologize to them. The rejection by Chief Turtle comes after a medical treatment center. Anytime that you start seeing, oh, blasted, or oh, they destroyed them, or it's suspicious. Take all of that shit, and the one in the BBC was a good example of it. Right. There was... And then the stage invasion began. Members of a far-right group called Generation Identity rushed in, unfurling a banner calling the audience hypocrites and throwing fake blood over some of them. The performers screamed, fearing that they were under attack. There were scuffles as some in the audience began shouting, "Nazis raus," or "Nazis out," and tried to eject the protesters. Ima was one of the performers. She had fled Mosul in Iraq when it was taken over by the so-called Islamic State group. "We came from the land of fear," she says, "and now in the darkness and confusion she was scared again." Emotional language. Right. Yeah. The young man who leads the GI in Austria plays down the incident. "I actually don't think people were really traumatized," he said. "I don't know anybody who had a severe trauma or a medical condition." PETA does this same kind of cringy shit. They bring fake blood, they unfurl their banners, they strip off their clothes, they throw paint on people, and everyone just goes, yeah, PETA's just a bunch of crazy nut jobs. Hell, I'd wager that PETA has killed more things than these people have. Actually, I can prove it. Because PETA's got a whole bunch of shelters and their own practices where they just euthanize animals. They got a ridiculously high kill rate. And they claim to be pro-animal. Not the point. Still streaming. Was supposed to be something that's up an hour ago. Actually, I've only just cracked an hour, so Long Man Bad's going to have to exist today. Point I'm trying to get at here: learn to read emotionally manipulative language. Learn to read what the facts of a story are. If I read this going, okay, what has occurred? I would go, okay, new face of the far right in Europe. Technically accurate? So, this right here. However, Sellner's insistence that his movement is non-racist and non-violent doesn't have everyone convinced. It reads as a, oh yeah, right, you're not. As opposed to, Sellner disputes the claims made by others that his group is violent and racist. Okay, to be accurate, people have claimed he is. But doesn't have everyone convinced. Reads odd. In April of 2016, Generation Identity disrupted a play being performed by Syrian asylum seekers at the University of Vienna. Members from Generation Identity disrupted the play, unfurled a protest banner calling the audience hypocrites, and threw fake blood over some audience members. There were scuffles as some in the audience began or tried to eject the protesters. This entire bit here, right? This is bringing up somebody's emotion and fear to stoke a particular feeling. You're supposed to empathize with Ima, just instinctively. Well, she fled Mosul in Iraq when it was taken over by a so-called Islamic State group. Okay. So her opinions on just everything are more valid? We should be more concerned with what she is saying about how things should be in this country than with what Sellner's group is saying? We came from the land of fear, and now in the darkness and confusion, she was scared again. Okay. It can accurately be stated, right? Somebody else could flip this from the Generation Identity side and say, coming from a country with a history of violent extremism and government overreach. Sellner and his non-government Sellner and his NGO Generation Identity, now fear for their lives and their safety as the rates of Islamic terror attacks increase across Europe. That would be emotionally manipulative in the pro-GI stance, as opposed to being emotionally manipulative for the same things. X person is scared because of Y group. Y group is scared because of, like, you got to be able to read that. And if you don't read the news like that, I'm sorry, but you're a sucker. Okay? Generation Identity threw fake blood on people. It disrupted a play. All right? There were scuffles when members of the audience tried to remove the protesters. I was like, okay. A protest occurred. They disrupted a play. So what? It's like, yeah, you know what? People went to see a play. I understand that it's an opportune moment for the particular message you're sending. You shouldn't do it. Find another way to, like, those people paid money to go see a play. Leave them be. But there's no reason to write this article the way that it's written. We thought they were going to kill us. In my homeland, it's just so much killing and dead people, so that's what we believed. Like, belief. As we thought. I was scared. I'm sad. Okay, Sellner and his group are scared. Plenty of people in Europe are scared. Trucks smash into Christmas markets. People blow themselves up. They shoot up concert halls. They shoot up, magazine offices. Plenty of people have plenty of reasons to be scared. But can we not just say, these are the facts of the matter and move on from it? No, because we have reader bases to deal with. We've got a particular agenda we have to push, and I guess I have an agenda to push in that I would like people to read an article, especially one that they're going to cite to me, and look at it and go, okay, this is emotional language. This is emotional language. This is unnecessarily lengthy phrasing, and it only serves a certain goal. So that they can then go, okay, well, if I take the same story from like 3 other publications, and I look for just the facts of what occurred, and then I ask myself, why did these things, like, why are these, how did these facts come to be? What events took place prior to these? What are the motivations for these people? And you read more and you read more and you read more. And at the end of the day, when you've filtered out all of the emotionally manipulative language, you got a whole bunch of these. This is the courts would call, I suppose, an agreed statement of facts, where both the prosecution and the defense say, yes, we do not dispute that these things occurred as described. And you work from there. If you want to editorialize it, if you want to put your own spin on it, that's your right. I believe that is your right, that no one should be able to take from you. But I do believe that when people read what you've written, they should take the emotionally manipulative language with a grain of salt. They should go, okay, this person has a specific goal. They want me to think a certain way based on this article. They don't just want to inform me of what occurred. They want me to think a certain way. It's their right to want to persuade you. It's their right and their prerogative to phrase things the way they do. It's your right, and it should be your responsibility to look critically at a story and say, I think you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes, or I think you're trying to make this have more of an impact than it needs to. So if that's what you take from this, be critical of what you read and avoid emotionally manipulative language. Free speech is, to me, not something you can separate from being American. People who think that freedom of speech should only be valued if they're, for those who are already American citizens, I find to be self-interested rather than being principled. on that particular issue. And I think you folks are all awesome for watching. Cheers, guys.